Great. Okay, welcome back. For our next presentation this hour, we have Maia Gatlin from the Georgia Institute of Technology, who's going to explain how a sensor on your toilet could help monitor the spread of disease. So we can't wait to learn more, Maia.
Hi, so today I'm going to be presenting the feces thesis, which I presented yesterday. So using ML to detect diarrhea noises. So why on earth would we want to do that? Well, if we can start to track these sort of events, specifically if there's a spike in a community of diarrheal events, then we might be able to track the spread of waterborne illnesses such as cholera that affect millions of people per year and result in up to 143,000 deaths according to the World Health Organization. So the goal here was to create a sensor that we could deploy to areas that may not have immediate access to health officials and be able to alert them and slow that spread, hopefully even stop it. So the way that the sensor would work, an event would occur on a toilet or a latrine. We have a microphone that would be listening and connected to a microprocessor such as a Raspberry Pi. The machine learning algorithm is pre-trained and onboard that Raspberry Pi. The temporal signals brought in, we only record for 10 seconds and then we convert that signal to a spectrogram, so an image representation that's frequency versus time of the acoustic features there. We pass that over to the ML on board, ask it to evaluate it and say, is this diarrhea or is it not? So in terms of where we found our data and what we did with it, we got our data from publicly available sources like YouTube and SoundSnap, YouTube primarily. We did not know anything about the folks that made those sounds originally. Again, we would get full-length videos. Some of these were 10 hours, so it's amazing what you can find on YouTube in terms of sound. We cut those up into 10-second samples, and then we convert those to spectrograms, as I mentioned. And the reason that we're doing this, by the way, is because the machine learning algorithm that we chose is called a convolutional neural net, and it takes images as input. We wanted to use this. There's other ways that you can do this. You can take the temporal signal as well. This was a really well-developed method that we'd seen in literature, and it offers us some really interesting characteristics. If you can see in the presentation, the temporal signal for flatulence versus the spectrogram, you can see these harmonics. Those are called trills, and they're actually really specific to flatulence. And we're able to see things like that with spectrograms. So I mentioned that we only classify diarrhea or no diarrhea. We still want to train our model on each different class and have data in each different class. And the reason we're doing this is because defecation and urination don't sound the same or look the same in a spectrogram. So if we pass this to a machine learning algorithm and all of that's in one bucket, then it's really confusing to try and say all of these features or something else. So we want it to be able to say, this is urination, this is defecation, this is diarrhea, and this is flatulence. Additionally, we split up our data into some buckets to help us make sure that we're training properly. We have 70% of the online data going to training, 10% going to validation, which occurs simultaneously with the training, and it's just to check and make sure that it's learning in the right direction. And then we held out 20% for test, and it's data that it never got to see during training, and this allows us to evaluate the model after. We also did something called augmentation. We did this for several reasons, and augmentation is basically just taking a real data point, changing it a little bit, and creating another data point. There are lots of reasons to do this. One, we didn't have a lot of online data, so we needed to create more. And so if you can augment, you can create more realistic data samples by masking the time in areas, masking frequency in areas, adding some noise to it, and things like that. It also is a deterrent to something called overfitting, where the model is essentially just memorizing the input instead of actually learning the features. So if it gets random things like this it's not expecting, then it's able to be a little bit more robust in its learning. For the training data, for every one real data point, we had 7 augmented ones. And for the test data, we had 2 to 1. We didn't augment our test data that much because we wanted it to still be realistic. So it was only augmented with something, background noise that would be like people shuffling or talking a little bit, things you'd expect to hear in a bathroom environment, not the time masking and stuff like that. So we then train our model and evaluate our model. So in terms of results, how did we do? We did a couple tests. This shows you what misclassifications occurred. So this first test had test data with no background noise that it didn't see during training. We had a couple misclassifications, but overall we were able to predict the correct event 98% of the time. We did another test that's a little bit harder. We had some background noise, and this one we expect to perform a little worse, but still got 96% out of that. We additionally wanted to try to make real data because we only had 10 weeks for this project, so we wanted to see if we could generate some fake sounds that kind of sound real and trick the ML model. We created a lovely machine called the Synthetic Human Acoustic Reproduction Testing Machine. That's called the SHART machine, and it had several subsystems to generate fake noises. These were not used in training. I'll kind of speed through this since we're low on time. And then for results, we passed the data from the SHART machine in and tried to trick the ML and say, what do you think this is? We had loads of misclassifications because it's not real data, but we were able to trick the ML algorithm about 72% of the time. In conclusion, I'll leave you with this lovely demonstration of the sensor. We are playing diarrhea. The green light means we're recording on the diarrhea detector. The microphone's listening on top, and then in just a few seconds, once it's done with the inference stage, we'll want to see a red light, meaning that it detected diarrhea, since that is what was played. So just a second. Yay, we did it. Okay, so in conclusion, there are definitely some room for improvement. This was only 10 weeks, as I mentioned, so we want to improve our ML model, see if we can get more real data. Again, IRB approval is a time constraint we have to work with, improve our simulated noise, and additionally, the acoustic environment that we'd look to deploy the sensor might be something more like a latrine, not a toilet, and this was only dealing with toilet acoustics. That's it. Let me know if you have any questions, and shout out to my teammates.
Great. Well, thank you, Maya. That was very interesting. So I'll kick us off with a question. I imagine since this is like an acoustic monitor instead of something like a camera or something, there's some advantage privacy-wise. Is that kind of the case?
Yes, and yeah, I should have mentioned that a key point of this was we wanted it to be non-invasive so that folks are comfortable, hopefully a little bit more comfortable than potentially having their pictures of their excrement taken or samples or anything identifiable. So the perk with noise is you can't really tell who it came from unless they said their name as they use the restroom, and hopefully they don't do that. But yeah, there's definitely perks.
Oh, okay. We've got a question from our audience here.
Yeah, this could hardly be more subtle or not so subtle. I mean, wouldn't the subject know whether they had diarrhea or not? So what's the broader motivation for actually picking out features in the sound?
Absolutely. Great point. People, they know what's going on with their bodies. The point of this one is really to be able to track a community, not just an individual as of right now. There are purposes for individuals later, but in terms of a community, we want to be able to alert health professionals, hey, we're having a lot of cases in this community. We think that there could be an issue here. So keeping track of that data and sort of highlighting points where we're noticing a large amount of diarrhea cases. In terms of an individual, if we wanted to take this to a different place, we could, David and Kaye, who helped on this project, looked into flatulence a lot in urination, and I'm not the expert on this, but there can be some geometric changes in the rectum that might also have changes acoustically that you may not understand that your farts or your poo or something like that is changing, but if we could look at tracking that in terms of like rectal cancer or things like that for individuals, but as we studied it, it was from more of a community perspective.
Great. Do we have any live stream questions? Okay. Well, I'll just go ahead and ask one more if you want to answer it. How did this project kind of come to be? What was the inspiration for it?
Yes, so credit to that goes to Dr. Alexis Noel, who's a researcher with me at Georgia Tech Research Institute. She was already doing work on something called Reinventing the Toilet for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, where they're looking to essentially have the output, the waste that comes from toilets, not be toxic for areas where sewage systems aren't as developed. So she actually came up with this idea and on a wild hair was like, hey, do you want to help out with this? So I'm an aerospace engineer by trade, but she had this idea, so all props go to her in terms of founding it.
Looks like we do have a live stream question.
Yes, we have a live stream question from Avery Thompson from AIP. He's asking, developing the algorithm is only half the problem. What might implementing this on a large scale look like?
Yeah, that's a great point. So moving forward, we really need to look at how we would wirelessly transfer the data, how would we generate a database, how would we ping that database and keep folks up to date with that. So yeah, that's a great point. More research needs to go into it. This was definitely a prototype stage, so we were just trying to figure out, can we actually do this? Is it feasible? And so moving forward, yeah, there would definitely be a lot more that would go into that.
Well, thank you so much, Maya, and we'll be back in a couple of minutes for our final presentation this hour.